Hello everyone and welcome for this new episode. In this one we are going to talk about how to draw a mouth, the do's and don'ts, and how you can go from this to this. Alright, so this episode has been suggested by Paul on Patreon, so Paul, if you're watching, thank you very much for the suggestion, and let's do this. Alright, so the first principle is don't delineate the lips. These are bad examples, you should not follow them. Lips don't necessarily have an outline. Well, there is actually a chromatic outline because the lips are slightly more red than the rest of the skin. But this is mostly a chromatic thing, so it only concerns color. It's actually called the vermilion border, but since you're not painting with vermilion, you don't need that with your pencil, so you don't never want to put a big outline. It doesn't exist, and instead what you want is to just follow the volume of the shape of the lips. You want to understand that when the light hits the lips, there's actually more light hitting this part right here than this part because it's curved inwards, like it goes towards the mouth. Like the various planes, if you want to deconstruct the mouth in various planes, you can see that this is only visible because it's the mouth like this is in the shadows. See, this is a profile, and when the light hits, this part is in the shadow. This is the nose right here. But the thing is, there is not a big outline around the lips, especially around the lower lip like this. Now, the next one is a do. You do want to darken very softly around the oral commissures, which are these parts. Right here, you see there is no softness. This is white and dark. And actually, around this part, there's a slight incurvation, which is actually due to the volume of the cheeks, which make the mouth like curve inwards. So you do want to soften very softly and very subtly around this part. And you also can make the commissure of the lips a little bit darker here at this part, because it will only provide a better sense of volume, and it gives a better impression. And as you can see, you can be very subtle with this, and you have a shading area around the mouth, depending on each person's face, of course. But generally, this part is safe to shade, but very, very softly. Now the next one is a don't. Don't trace a big dark line to separate the lips. Of course, there is a gap between the lips, and of course the inside of the mouth is not lit, so there is shadows there. So very often this line is very visible and dark, but this sort of thing is what a child would do. Like you ask them to draw a mouth and they just draw a line. This is not how it actually is. This separation between the lips doesn't have the same type of thickness or darkness depending on where you are and how the shadows are distributed. So right here you have shadows on this side, so this line right here is a little bit darker, a little bit thicker, and this part receives more light, so it can be a little bit softer around this part, like this. So the key is to preserve line variety. You want to make things darker and thicker where there are shadows, or at parts where it follows a strong incurvation, and you want to keep the lines very soft and light where it's needed. Now the next part is a do. You do want to shade the philtrum very softly. This part is important to give an actual impression that the mouth is connected to the rest of the body. It's an important feature to keep in mind that it's present, the philtrum right here, but you don't want to put a line on the philtrum because this looks just awful. What you want to do instead is really suggest the presence of the philtrum, but very softly and with very, very soft pressure. Otherwise, it kind of looks, it can look like a mustache or a weird shadow. So the philtrum is actually a shape that goes like this. So this is the nose, and the philtrum is, you know, this very, very, very typical structure. So these parts receive a lot of light. So I do suggest that you keep these white or as light as possible, and just softly suggest shadows around these two sort of L shapes that follow the what's called the Cupid bow, because it looks like a bow. So this part is the Cupid's bow. And you can just suggest the presence of the philtrum with very subtle shading. So I do suggest that you shade one on this. So you shade the jaw, the cheek on this side, for instance. So see, you suggest the presence of the philtrum, but you don't have to put an awful line like this. And you can just very, very softly suggest how it like curves inwards as well. And that's it. It's enough. You don't need to make anything really that much more present. You can be very, very subtle about it. Next one is don't. You don't want to draw white teeth with big lines to separate the teeth. This does look very creepy, and this is one of the weirdest thing you can do if you want to ruin a drawing. Like a person smiling doesn't look like this. This is absolutely awful. If you really want to show teeth, you should never forget that teeth are always kind of in the shadows of the lips, because light comes here in this direction and the teeth are in the shadows of the lips. And as this is why they are not pure white. And also, you should never make them too white, because, well, teeth are never that white. So always shade the teeth and try to create the separation with very, very soft shading, but not much. You really don't want to create too much of a separation between the teeth. Now, another very important thing is you want to understand how the teeth affect the volume and the shape of the mouth. Let's show you this example. You see how the teeth appear here when the mouth is open. The mouth opens by the action of the lower jaw. Usually you don't see the lower teeth, the more visible, except if the person is really opening the mouth really wide. But generally it's more subtle than this. And the teeth affect the shape of the entire mouth. The mouth is wrapped around the teeth, and you can see the difference with a very old person without teeth. You have this very characteristic shape of the mouth going inwards because, well, it's only gums, there are no teeth anymore, and you have this very very specific shape. And yeah, for a baby who doesn't have teeth yet, you generally have this shape with the lower jaw, which goes a little bit further back this way. Now let's talk about wrinkles. You don't want to use lines to draw wrinkles like this. This would be a mistake. This doesn't look good, even for a young person or an old person. Wrinkles like these, like smiling wrinkles, they don't work. Wrinkles are not lines. If you want to think about wrinkles, you want to think more about like sort of a tube-shaped fold in the skin, but it's not just a line, it's a complex volume that's created by the fold of the expression on the skin. And if you want to create these wrinkles and suggest them, what you want to do is shade them softly. So right here, this person is smiling, so there are probably going to have wrinkles around the mouth. So you want to avoid strong lines. What you want to do is instead create soft shading like this. Also very important, you want to avoid to put the smiling wrinkle directly and make it touch the commissure of the lips. This doesn't exist. It's actually, there are actually two layers. There's one directly caused by the incurvation of the lips and one outside, and there are even others depending on each person. So there are always two layers of smiling wrinkles, one here, and it works for smiling wrinkles for even on an old person where the wrinkles are way more visible. You always have one layer here just next to the mouth and one just a little bit further. Now the next one is also you don't want to forget about the shadow on the mentolabial sulcus. What is the mentolabial sulcus? It's this part right here. Mentolabial sulcus. And this part usually is in the shadow. So the more a person has like big, juicy, carnal lips, and the more the prominent and the more in the shadows this area is. And generally, if a person has very thin lips, well, in this case, this shadow might not be that strong. But if the person has big lips, it's usually going to be very visible. Also it depends on how prominent the chin is as well. So never forget about this shadow. This shadow is actually more important than tracing a line. You can suggest a mouth very easily by just making the upper lip and just this shadow. See, you don't need a line on the lower lip, but if you don't have this shadow, like, it's not really going to look as good. And finally, the last is you do want to pay attention to the individual volume and shape. Every person has a different mouth, of course, also a different smile, different ways of different types of expression, different types of wrinkles, and there are no principles that work for every person. You do want to pay attention to all these volumes and principles that I talked about, but ultimately you do want to only pay attention to the unique characteristics of each person's appearance. That's the more important thing. Alright, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to suggest me video ideas like this, you can join the Patreon. The link is in the description below. Thank you again to all my patrons. Thank you, Paul, for suggesting this one. I'll also leave a link to my oil painting course. You can check it out if you are interested. And yeah, don't hesitate to like and subscribe. I'll see you for the next episode. Until then, have fun drawing. Bye.